Villainous Heroics by I Believe in a Happily Ever After on AO3. Chapter 8. Author's Note. So for those who are asking if this is after USJ, it's not. This story covers the USJ events briefly and goes on for most of Class 1A's first year, although the timeline might be vague and unsettled where I don't want to get too close to the plot. Above all, this is Eraser Mike fluff. Well, after this chapter, it is. Enjoy. Yamada, just when are you gonna give up on this guy? Startled at the voice, Hisashi did his best not to shrink from where he had been, distractedly dealing with his favorite customer. I mean, he doesn't even notice what you write on his cup every day. Maybe he's just too shy to mention it. At the flat, disappointed look given at him, Hisashi puffed up his cheeks with a pout. There's no need to be mean, Suzuki-chan. There's no need to be mean, Suzuki-chan. I'll stop being mean when you get a job fit for your age. You know, only teenagers and college students work in coffee shops, right? Right, because this is just sad, Yamada. When did children get to be so disrespectful? Hisashi tissed, glancing around the coffee shop to see it was dead, as usual. Lovely coffee tended to be on the expensive side, and unlike chain stores, they took a bit longer to make an order. The result tended to be very few customers, even in the mornings. Also, stop prying into my love life. Aha! That means there's a love life to speak of. Suzuki pulled herself onto the counter, the extra rate doing very little to make her look intimidating. Hisashi was certain there was no one with bubblegum pink pigtails who looked threatening. Come on, Yamada, tell your senpai everything. You started here 3 days before I did, kid. Hisashi sighed and went to restock the coffee shops, contemplating poking a hole in the bottom of each one. He's just a cute guy. Your old man tastes are weird. He looks so old. Yamada, he's probably has kids my age. Considering Aizawa was around Hisashi's age of 30, he sincerely doubted the man had a 17-year-old child. Just ask him out on a date the next time he's in here. I mean, I've seen some of the sappy stuff you write on his cup. Hey, my heart and soul go into the lyrics and poems I pick out on those cups. Hisashi rolled his eyes at the disapproving look he was given, turning back to his work. It's fine if he doesn't notice them. Honestly, I would be surprised if he did. He looks like he can hardly breathe in the morning, let alone read. You've been stalking the guy for months, Yamada. At this point, it's just getting sad. Suzuki huffed, mumbling and muttering to herself, before she snapped her fingers. I got it. You can... Damn it. Looking back, Hisashi tried not to laugh at seeing the girl was floating off the counter. Shut up. Hey, easy, Suzuki-chan. Hisashi smoothed, seeing the look of fear in the girl's eyes as she started flowing higher. Before she could get too high, Hisashi grabbed her wrists and gently pulled her back down until she could safely grasp her fingers and fall out of the air. I still have problems with my own quirk, you know? Yeah, but you're a hopeless old man. It's fine if you can't use your quirk, right? Suzuki gave him a rare smile, even as she kicked him out and forced him to jump back to dodge. And we were talking about your love life. Don't change the subject. I wasn't. Hisashi contemplated crossing his arms, and he leaned back against the counter. I'm listening, though, if you want to share that idea you obviously had. You mentioned he was some pro-hero or something, right? Some pro-hero or something. Hisashi had told her no less than a dozen times by now that Aizawa was Eraserhead, one of the top underground heroes of all in Japan. Stage a scene where he has to save you. When he asks how you can repay him, then you can offer to, repay him. I am almost absolutely certain that it is illegal for someone your age to talk to someone my age about that. And even if it wasn't, it feels like it should be. Children were so much worse than they were in his day, and he hadn't thought that possible. You're no fun, Suzuki huffed, jumping off the counter. You just can't keep giving him secret love letters he never reads, you know. You have to get his attention in another way, Yamada, or nothing's ever gonna happen. Oh, don't worry. I have my ways of getting Aizawa's attention. At least, President Mike had his ways of doing that. If everything went to plan, then he'd definitely have Eraser's attention tonight. I don't know, maybe you should cut your hair and shave that stupid Hold your tongue! Hisashi had been about to pull off his greatest scheme as a villain yet. It would have been the perfect scheme to really gather media's attention, get his point across, and prove to the heroes of the world that they were never looking. He had planned it out for weeks, had gone over every detail as careful as possible, and had been ready for any and all possible setbacks. He had not, however, been prepared for the 2 hours it took him to climb a tree to rescue a squealing, screaming cat that seemed to be stuck right at the very top, with a very tall tree, too. The scream had broke his heart before he could even try to mount a defense against it. So when Aizawa found him, 2 hours later, it was not to the sight of a brilliant scheme and trap that he had miraculously planned and laid out, but instead of the sight of Hisashi, exhausted and sore from rescuing a cat from a tree. I would ask what you're doing, but mostly I'm just hoping you fall out of that tree. Maybe if Hisashi pretended he wasn't there, then Aizawa would go away and leave him to his misery and peace. If you step there, you're going to fall. I have no doubt you'll catch me, Eraser. Hisashi called down cheerfully, putting his way on another branch instead. Don't you know it's rude to shout at people who are in trees, though? It's distracting and could cause them to fall. Who says that's not what I want? Aizawa was waiting at the bottom of the tree, and even from where he was, Hisashi could tell he was tracking his progress with careful eyes. It was almost enough to make him curl at his heart at how obvious the show of care and worry, but he did rather need both his hands at the moment. You're breaking my heart, hero. Getting down to the last few branches, Hisashi carefully swung himself down, sighing in relief when he was back on the ground with his arms sorer than they had been to prove. Right then, Eraserhead, I have something to ask of you. Waiting a few seconds to make the moment more dramatic, Aizawa tensed, an uncertainty across from him. Hisashi untucked the kitten from where she had been hiding herself in his jacket as he climbed down the tree. Is that a cat? You like cats? Hisashi already knew the answer considering he had seen the man feed the alley cats near his coffee shop and only ever ate those cat muffins in the morning. They're cats, Aizawa said, as if that explains everything. Hisashi supposed it rather did for him. Honestly, Aizawa was like a cat himself some days. Right, can you take this little guy back to the station? I'm not welcome back there. He had angered the police chief, a horrible little man, with the last tip down the police station, so he'd rather avoid that place for a while longer. I almost wished you robbed banks, Aizawa finally murmured, looking honestly upset as Hisashi laughed and pushed the kitten into his arms. She doesn't have a collar, but she's well groomed and might be a lost pet, Hisashi explained, giving the sweet little thing a scratch under her chin. I'd take her myself and have some posters, but my lease only allows for one cat, and Snowball doesn't like to share. You have a cat. That would get Aizawa's attention, wouldn't it? Well, at least Hisashi wouldn't be lying to Suzuki when he said he finally had Aizawa's attention. A cat named Snowball. I know, it's a bad name, but it fits at the time. Hisashi laughed, shaking his head. I found him half drowned in glitter and took him home, and by the time I got him dried, he was a little floofball of screaming fluff. President Mike. Oh boy, full villain name. That wasn't good. Maybe Aizawa had realized what Hisashi's plan had been tonight. Go home. What? That had not been what Hisashi expected. Aizawa always ended the night by dragging him to the police station, except the 1 or 2 times Hisashi had managed to run away before he'd been cuffed. He had never just let Hisashi go. Oi, I know you don't think so, but I am a villain. No, you're really not. Hisashi didn't even raise his voice. He spoke evenly, meeting Hisashi's gaze as he held the quiet kitten in his arms. I'm telling you to go home because there's no point to what you've been doing. Why are you even doing this? No point? Hisashi cut himself off, taking a steady breath. Look, I'm not just gonna walk by a cat stuck in a tree when I can get up there and help. And this one is just a kitten. Mike. Aizawa took a steady breath after his outburst, looking frustrated, although Hisashi couldn't tell if it was with him or Aizawa himself. You're not a villain. Well, not in the traditional sense, but that was the whole point of this, wasn't it? You've been giving us tips off and helping with the trigger case for months now. That's just because our agendas line up. It's not like it cost me anything to help you out when it didn't hurt me any. You're not an idiot. The words weren't surprised and tinged with something amused and warm this time. They were instead cold and angry. If you were really trying to change the system, then you could have done a number of things with that trigger beyond giving it to me. Funny for you to say I'm not an idiot and then treat me like one, Hisashi drawled, feeling a twinge of cold rage that he hadn't felt in a long time. You think I'm just some pity case of yours, don't you? Some way to break up the long, predictable patrols. Aizawa flinched. Hisashi narrowed his eyes. Thought so. Whatever you want to believe, this has never been just some game to me. Yet you treat it like one. Aizawa shook his head before Hisashi could get a word out. You take over bars, cause mischief, and you end up helping more than you end up hurting. You're like a child who doesn't know what a villain really is. Do you even know how many people died in villain attacks each year? You do your research, don't you? There is no such thing as a reformed villain in our society. Criminals and thugs, sure, maybe, if they were people in the wrong place at the wrong time, but villains? Villains are not a game for you to play at. A real villain is out there to cause harm for the sheer fact that they want something. Power, attention, recognition, money, the list goes on. You work to get attention, but you never do anything with it. You play around like the kid who's stuck with the role of a villain during a game of heroes. You? Dangerous? Don't make me laugh. Aizawa's voice had gone cold and amused, a smirk pulling at his lips as he stared Hisashi down, never stopping. You keep telling me your quirk is dangerous. Maybe that's true. But it's a poor villain's quirk for someone like you. You couldn't be dangerous if you tried. When was the last time you hurt someone innocent, Mike? When was the last time you sacrificed someone standing in your way for your own plans? When was the last time you killed someone, Mike? Aizawa stared at him for a long moment. Finally, huffing, something that could have been a laugh if there was any heart to it. Go home, Mike. For the first time in a very long time, Hisashi found himself utterly speechless as Aizawa turned away and just left. He walked away and turned his back as if he knew, without a doubt, that Hisashi wouldn't even try to put up a fight and attack him. No, you don't get to just end it like that. The man didn't even bother to turn around, instead disappearing into one of the alleys. Hisashi knew that even if he ran, he wouldn't see the man again tonight. Eraserhead! Slapping his hands over his mouth, he felt the tip of his quirk. Hisashi stared at the empty seat in front of him, where a hero, someone who he saw as a hero, just told him to go home. As if there was anything home besides a loud cat and busted furniture. Fuck! It had been so long since he's lost control over his quirk, and it only took a few words from someone like Aizawa. No, it only took a few words from Aizawa to make him lose it. It had been months since he started everything as Present Mike, and he had gotten comfortable. He had gotten too comfortable in his routine with Aizawa and trying to get attention focused on him. What else was he supposed to do? Become known as a villain would make people look, and if they looked, they would listen. They wouldn't listen if he didn't make them, though. Hisashi gritted his teeth as he clenched his fist, started to shake, one thought running through his head. It wasn't ending like this. He wasn't just going to let Aizawa end it like this. Like Hisashi was some misbehaved child who needed a slap on the wrist and some advice. Hisashi had been annoyed before, and he had certainly been upset, but now, now he was pissed. Hisashi didn't see Aizawa in Lovely Cafe the next day, and Suzukai didn't ask about his sudden change in mood. He didn't bother to offer an explanation either, no matter how many times she looked like she wanted to start the conversation. The silent was better. He wouldn't have been able to focus on anything else anyways, what with how Aizawa's words kept running through his mind. Had he been the one to think this was all some sort of game? Was he just humoring the child playing heroes and villains then? Hisashi had known that Aizawa was blunt with a sharp, depressed sense of humor, but before last night, he had never thought the man as cruel. It had been months, yet Aizawa still didn't seem to understand what the purpose of Present Mike was. Did he not see? Was it not obvious? It wasn't a game, but an attack brought onto their own battlefield. The world of heroes was filled with media attention, bright lights, and the knowledge that the world has constantly watching. It was the opposite where they lived. Their world was filled with shadows, secrets, and the knowledge no one in the world would ever see what happened on these streets. That could change, though, if a bright, flashy, and loud villain repeatedly attacked the same areas and pulled off ridiculous crimes. The media would be forced to act, eventually, if for no other reason than to satisfy their curiosity. Once they looked, however, Hisashi would have to make sure they didn't look away, no matter what it would have taken. If a light needed to be shined down upon these dark streets, then he would be the one to take all the blame, and hell there would be to pay. If Aizawa was going to accuse him of being nothing but a game, though, then Present Mike would have to show him that it wasn't. He wasn't dangerous. His quirk wasn't a villain's quirk. Fine. Hisashi would just prove true what everyone else had ever told him. Adjusting his headphones, Hisashi glanced up at the building in front of him. It was an old, abandoned brick that should have been empty that night, with the time and location. It was close enough to get the attention of some hero agencies, though. You don't want a game, Eraserhead. All right. Planting his feet and making sure his stance was solid, Hisashi danced his fingers across his directional speakers before turning it off. Then how about a show? Taking in a slow, deep breath to fill his lungs with as much air as possible, Hisashi didn't bother to hold back his quirk any longer, throwing everything into his voice as he opened his mouth and screamed. The world fell silent. Nothing escaped past his headphones as the vibration rocked through him. Hisashi swore he could feel the shiver of paved road underneath his feet. When he finally was forced to suck in gulps of air, Hisashi opened his eyes, not quite sure when he had even closed them. Looking up at the buildings in front of him, Hisashi gave a bitter laugh at seeing every window in eyesight look to have been shattered, the buildings around him crumbling. The building directly in front of him, the one he remembered so well, looked like it had been shattered in pieces. These buildings had been condemned for years, but Hisashi got petty satisfaction at seeing that building, at least, would never be used again. Flipping his directional speakers back on, Hisashi looked around for a fire escape that looked steady, making his way up to the rooftops as quick as possible, body vibrating with tension and adrenaline. This time, with this much noise and destruction, it would be more than an Eraserhead to show up. It took almost half an hour, but Hisashi was right at his guess that Eraserhead wouldn't be the only one. There was a pro hero in front of him, a pro hero who was well dressed and very revealing. Ah, midnight. Then, looking around for Aizawa, Hisashi scowled at himself when he didn't see the man. What was taking him so long? You're not Eraserhead. It didn't seem like there were any other heroes around, at least. Look, Hisashi sighed, taking his sunglasses off for a moment and giving a beaming smile. Nothing against you, Miss Midnight, but could you beat it? He slid his glasses back on, keeping a smile that he didn't feel. It's just that Eraserhead and I have a thing going on, you dig? Feeling his knees suddenly prickle, Hisashi caught himself before he could completely fall on his face, swearing as he quickly covered his nose and mouth at remembering this was Midnight. Her quirk, while simple, was a powerful one. Dalty, Midnight hissed, rolling her eyes as she walked over to him, heels making a sharp sound against the concrete of the building's roof. You must be Present Mike, then. Eraser had told me you could scream, but didn't mention it could get like this. There was a pink mist that surrounded the air. Hisashi cursed himself for not noticing it sooner, as he felt his head was being filled with cotton. Glaring up at the hero, Hisashi saw Midnight only give him a sharp smile. Oh, you seem like you would be fun. A sudden lunge, and Midnight had his wrist wrapped and held tightly, her free hand gripping his chin and forcing him to hold his breath even tighter. Aw, come on, baby. Don't you want to take a nap? Hisashi met her eyes and glared, lungs and chest burning, as she shook his head, the need to breathe. Midnight making an approval sound. You certainly last long, don't you? I can see why Eraserhead is so caught up on you. There was no use. Hisashi already breathed in more than enough of the mist to drag him down, and judging by the way his visions was swimming, it wouldn't be much longer until he was fully under. Gaze catching on Midnight's. Hisashi sucked in a breath, tasting the sweet scent that coated his mouth before he spoke. Tell him it wasn't a game. Hisashi had time to see Midnight's surprised look before he felt himself tip to the side. He was out before his body even hit the ground. The sudden sensation of something cold and wet smacking his face had Hisashi jerk up with a gasp, the noise turning into a pained hiss at the bright sunlight that burned his uncovered eyes. Scrambling to find where his glasses were, Hisashi snapped them up when he saw a twinge of orange before shoving them on his face. Damn kids, you dress crazier every night. An old woman with a wet mop was staring down at him, looking aggravated. Get off this roof. I have to do cleaning. What time is it? The sun was well on its way into being in the sky, and it had to be late morning at the earliest. Hisashi mind scrambled to try and adjust to the change. It had been midnight just a few seconds ago. Midnight. Midnight. Almost 11. The old man, a janitor, snorted, giving him a kick. Get off my damn roof already. All right, I'm going. Standing up and more than a bit wobbly, Hisashi gulped down, lungful of clean, untainted air as he looked around at the bright, sunny day. A sunny day had never felt as cold as this one. Not only had Midnight not bothered to take him to the police station after drugging him unconscious, but it was a safe bet that Eraserhead had never even shown up. Hisashi had done more damage in one night than he had ever done in his whole run as a villain, and Aizawa had never even showed himself. Bitter, he decided. Didn't even begin to describe how he was feeling. Present Mike, right? A body dropped into the seat beside him. Voice loud, even over the deafening bass of the club that Hisashi was attempting to get himself drunk in. He had half a mind to cause some trouble, but he was waiting until he was a bit closer to wasted instead of just tipsy. Getting approached by people who know me in clubs seems to be becoming a new thing of mine. Hisashi joked, shot glass held between the lax fingers as he turned his gaze to the man, studying him quickly. It looked like he was armed, and the amount of muscle and where it was showed that the man knew how to fight, if nothing else. What can I do for you? How would you like to join a little party that's being thrown? Oh, now Hisashi was curious. But why should he be? It wasn't like a villain would care much. And what makes you think your party is worth going to? The smile the man gave him was a wide and wild, and looked like nothing but trouble. You're the one who wants to destroy the hero system, right? Well, at least he was stirring up attention somewhere. The one who wants revenge on heroes? Maybe. Hisashi sang the words, drawing it out and turning around in his chair and doing his best to put on a cheerful face. He couldn't help but think on how Aizawa would have known his smile was fake in the moment. What do you have in mind? Something to show off all of Japan just who the strong ones in the world really are. The man laughed, voice just barely heard over the thumping of music. What would you say if I said the symbol of peace could be defeated? I'd say you were crazy. There were the system of heroes, and there was All Might. He was the number one for a reason. He was the symbol of peace for a reason. And Hisashi had no delusions about defeating All Might. And what, you're gonna get you and your party killed? Don't be so sure. A slip of paper was pressed into his free hand. A laugh, appliant to it. You know All Might started teaching at the hero school, right? UA? Hisashi had heard about that, but his focus was mostly on how it felt as if his heart had just stopped. UA was a school full of kids. Call me when you're interested, Present Mike. You would be good to have on our side. A group of villains were gathering together to try and defeat All Might. There was no way that would ever work. Seeing the man start to leave, Hisashi quickly raised his voice. Oh, wait! Who's the leader of your little party of yours? Don't worry about it, man. Don't worry about it. The laugh was wild and fierce, and so confident that Hisashi felt nausea pooling into his stomach. Let's just say he's in a league of his own. Let's just say we're in a league onto our own. Watching the man disappear into the crowds, Hisashi looked back down at the number in his hand before drawing in the shot in one go and thumping the glass on the bar counter. He didn't have a good feeling about this. Okay, so clearly we know that Hisashi's probably going to go to Aizawa and be like, hey, so your students might be attacked. I don't know. I'm a little concerned. I don't do hurting kids. Now, with that being said, that's what I think is going to happen and stuff. League of Our Own. That ending is really like, ooh, okay. So is it that... Now this has me questioning. Is it that the League is the one who contented him before, but the League doesn't work with Trigger? Okay, so I feel like it's the League of Villains. This is the one that in this club, right? This one. And then the other ones wasn't the League of Villains. It was, as I said, All for One. Not All for One. Hold up. That Overhaul. Both start with O. My bad. Overhaul. But I want to talk a little bit more about Mike's psychology. Clearly, at first, I very much thought it was like, okay, Hisashi all his life was told that his quirk was dangerous, not to use his quirk, and that he will only ever amount to hurting people. Therefore, he snapped and became that. The one thing he knows, like, okay, this is what people will see me, this is what I'll become, right? Typical, I see this a lot in My Hero Academia fanfiction, right? Something that barely occurred to me now is maybe you know, it's at the steam of that, it's that, right? Hisashi consciously thinks that is the reason, right? But deep down inside, there is a different reason, right? Like, he's like, okay, I'll become a villain and save people. I'll you know, villainous heroics, right? And, but deep down inside, Hisashi is just, how do I put this in words? I had words for it, but I just can't find the words for it. Psychology is really hard to word and put stuff like that. Or, like, specifically this type of, like, thought process. Okay. For example, Hisashi made a huge show, right? Destroyed a whole building, shook everything, and when Eraserhead didn't show up, he was disappointed. Bitter, in his words, didn't even begin to describe how he felt, right? Which got me to thinking, okay, he is so hurt about Eraserhead not seeing that. He was so hurt that Eraserhead thought that this was a whole game to him. Because his whole life, Hisashi probably has been like, I want to be a hero, and everyone's like, you can't be a freaking hero. All you'll ever be is a villain. Your quirk is too dangerous, right? And so he clung on to that. All right, I'm a villain now. Notice me. Accept me. Validate me, right? While still trying to change, you know, society for the better. And so when somebody's like, this is just a joke, again, he's feeling that whole nothing I do will ever amount to anything kind of situation. I can't become a hero. My quirk is too dangerous, and I quote, and I have a villain's quirk. I will only be a villain, right? But the second he becomes a villain, apparently he's not villain enough. He's not, it's all that stuff where it's like, well, shit, I can't do anything. And the one person who even gave me attention didn't even show up. Kind of thing, which with that type of psychology, do I think he's actually mindful of that? No, I think this is something that's happening in your unconscious. Humans are always craving validation. We crave it. We thrive off of it. It's why kids who grow up in neglectful homes end up having attachment and struggles with self-esteem and stuff like that, and also growing up too early and maturing too early. Why? Because they didn't get the validation and comfort and attention they needed as kids. Therefore, in their adult lives, they have this mindset of, I need to do everything myself. I don't need anybody else's validation. While slowly they're, literally destroying their mental health, because humans need validation. Even those who are like, I don't need anybody's praise to do what I do. Okay, yeah, you don't necessarily need their praise, but a little validation could go a long way. Think about it. You're having an awful day, and let's say someone who you very much appreciate, like a parent who you're really close to, or a friend you're really close to, or maybe a significant other, or someone you're romantically interested, or maybe your best friend in the world, right? You're having a horrible day, and that best friend or whatever, that significant person in your life is like, hey, it's gonna be okay. I'm here for you. You're doing wonderful. That, although obviously your day did not get any better, you still had a shitty day. It made it a bit more bearable. Why? Because you had validation and attention from someone, a support, right? Everybody needs a support group. Everybody needs a support, right? Whether it be a group of people, whether it be one person, right? I would suggest having more than one person as a support. Does not end well, right? It's why a lot of the times manipulators take away that support, isolation. Why? Because then you turn to the manipulator, for validation and attention. That stuff you need and crave, making it even more difficult for you to leave in the end. It's a wonderful tactic that once works a lot. Why? Because humans work on validation and attention. So that's why I think that's something that's happening in his mind. The whole, I can't be a hero, fuck. Fine, I'm a villain, but you don't even see me as such. What am I doing wrong? He wants that validation and attention, and right now, he wants it from Eraserhead, right? Because, why? Eraserhead is a true hero in his eyes, who is actually giving him the time of day. And even that hero is being like, you're not even villain enough, and they had that awful fight beforehand, and then he doesn't even show up. Personally, I would also be very, very hurt. I have attachment issues though, so that's a different story. But yeah, that's some of the psychology I wanted to talk about. This was one of my longer rants, because psychology is very interesting. But yeah, As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my socials and Discord server is down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.